There are some goodbyes that are never spoken out loud. They are not loud. They don't come with explanations. They don't leave behind obvious wreckage. They begin with something almost invisible. A feeling so thin, you might even doubt yourself for noticing it. You're still there. Everything on the outside looks the same. But inside, something has shifted just slightly. Like a clock that's still ticking, but the hands are no longer moving in sync. Like a familiar song, suddenly missing a low note you didn't realize you needed. Nothing is wrong. It just isn't right anymore. For Libra, this feeling arrives quietly. You don't fight it. You don't rush it. You keep trying to hold everything in balance, the way you always have. You tell yourself that with a little more patience, a little more compromise, a little more silence, everything will settle back into place. But there are moments when intuition doesn't shout, it whispers. And somehow, that whisper is impossible to ignore. You start to realize you're no longer standing where you truly belong. Not because someone pushed you out, but because that place has already fulfilled its role in your life. The scale that once helped you maintain harmony now feels heavy. You're not falling apart, but you're no longer light either. That's when your soul begins to speak a different language. Not logic, not intense emotion, but a meaningful silence. A small space opens up between you and what once felt familiar, and inside that space, you begin to hear yourself more clearly. Libra, this is not a moment for blame. No one is wrong here. There is no villain in this story. There is only a simple truth. Everything in the universe moves in cycles, and when a cycle completes itself, it doesn't need to be forced to continue. It only needs to be respected. You may not be able to name what's happening yet. You just know you no longer want to explain yourself. You no longer want to convince anyone. You no longer want to reshape who you are to fit into an old frame. And that doesn't make you weaker. It's the opposite. It's a sign of deep maturity. Some goodbyes don't need words because the souls involved already understand. They come to remind you that you've gone as far as you can in an old role, that the balance you once protected now needs to be redefined, not through sacrifice, but through honesty. And in this quiet moment, when there is no noise pulling at your attention, you begin to realize something essential. You haven't lost anything. You're simply returning to the past, what belongs to it. And you're standing in front of a space wide enough to breathe again, bright enough to see yourself more clearly, calm enough to hear your heart finding a new rhythm. There's no need to rush, no need to decide everything right now. Just stay with this feeling a little longer, because in this stillness, a different order is forming. Lighter, more honest, and more aligned with the person you're becoming. And when that honesty finally begins to reach inside, you start to realize just how long you've learned to stay. Not because you were happy, but because you believed harmony had to be protected at all costs. You learned when to stay quiet, when to bend, when to place your own needs last, so the bigger picture wouldn't be disturbed. For you, peace was always more important than winning. You were there, listening more than speaking, adjusting more than asking. You carried the responsibility of keeping everything from falling apart, even while small cracks were quietly forming inside you. Those cracks didn't hurt right away. They simply made you a little more tired each day. Tired in a way that's hard to name, hard to explain, and easy for others to overlook. There were mornings you woke up feeling heavy, without knowing why. No major conflict, no harsh words. Just the sense that you had to keep holding together a state of being that no longer felt natural. As if you were balancing on a wire that had been pulled tight for far too long. You used to believe that if you were patient enough, things would eventually realign. That if you waited a little longer, others would be ready. That if you endured just a bit more, harmony would return. But the universe doesn't run on endless endurance. It runs on truth. And the truth is, some phases survive only on the energy you give them, not because they are still being nourished from both sides. The exhaustion begins to speak more clearly, not through tears, but through a slow draining of vitality. You no longer feel the same anticipation, no longer wait the way you used to, no longer feel the need to explain yourself. And in that very quiet moment, there is a powerful message. You are not becoming weaker. You are simply no longer willing to trade yourself away to maintain a false sense of balance. Libra, some souls are born to create harmony, but not by erasing themselves. True harmony doesn't come from always being the one who gives way. It comes when you are standing in the place that is truly yours, with enough space to breathe and enough freedom to be yourself. And as you begin to understand this, you also begin to see that staying too long is no longer kindness. It becomes delay, a delay of growth, a delay of truth, a delay of a different version of you that has been waiting to live. Right now, the universe isn't pushing you away. It's simply no longer supporting what no longer fits. What once flowed smoothly begins to slow down. What once felt familiar begins to feel heavy, not as punishment, but so you can no longer turn away from what you're truly feeling. And inside this very real exhaustion, there is a gentle reminder. You've done enough. You've stayed long enough. You've protected the peace to the point of forgetting that you deserve peace too. This is not failure. This is the moment a deeper truth is finally being acknowledged, that the balance ahead will no longer be built on endurance, but on self-respect, honesty, and a very quiet kind of courage that has been waiting inside you all along. And when you finally stop resisting that exhaustion, something unusual begins to happen. The silence around you starts to grow thicker, deeper, but not frightening. It feels like the moment a room goes dark, leaving behind just one small light, enough to see what you've been avoiding for a long time. There has been a truth there all along. It didn't arrive suddenly. It grew with you, through every time you chose to look away, every time you told yourself things would work out, every time you reshaped yourself to fit into a situation that was no longer meant for you. You already knew, not in your mind, but in that familiar place in your chest. You know there are relationships that no longer walk in the same rhythm, not because love is missing, but because two souls are moving in different directions. You know there are jobs that no longer nourish you, even if they once held your greatest hopes. And you also know that the old version of you, the one who tried so hard to keep everything intact, has reached the point where rest is no longer optional. That truth never demanded to be spoken right away. It simply waited for you to be brave enough to stop denying it. And so you became quiet, not because you didn't know what to do, but because you were listening closely, listening to subtle signals, listening to your body, listening to the breathing rhythm of a life that wants to change. Libra, silence is not always avoidance. Sometimes it is the deepest form of honesty. When you no longer need to justify yourself, no longer need to explain, no longer need to convince anyone of what you're feeling. You allow the truth to stand on its own, unwarped by the fear of disappointing others. You begin to understand that staying would now require turning your back on yourself. And no matter how familiar that choice once felt, it is no longer one you can make. This truth does not arrive to create conflict. It arrives to end the quiet inner struggle that has lasted far too long. A decision is forming, not in your thoughts, but in your soul. It doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't need immediate action, but it is already there, clear, grounded, like a new anchor you're beginning to feel safe touching. And in this stillness, when there are no extra words, no roles left to perform, you realize something essential. You are not alone in choosing truth. You are being guided, gently, yet with certainty, as if an unseen current is carrying you away from what has already ended, preparing you for a necessary release. Not loud, not bitter, just deep enough to change the entire direction of your life. And when that decision no longer lives only in your thoughts, but settles inside you like a new breath, you begin to notice something shifting around you, not all at once, no dramatic moment, no clear sign you can point to and say, this is where everything changed. Just a lighter feeling, as if the air has been cleaned after a long stretch of rain. This goodbye, even if it has never been spoken out loud, was never meant to hurt anyone. It doesn't come from anger. It doesn't rise from resentment. It comes from the need to live honestly, from the longing to breathe in your own rhythm after years of holding your breath for the sake of harmony. That's why it carries a different kind of energy, the energy of release. When you allow yourself to let go in silence, the first thing that changes is not the outside world, but the way it feels inside you. Thoughts that once kept spinning begin to slow down. Questions that used to keep you awake at night no longer demand immediate answers. You start to feel a clarity that doesn't come from analysis, but from a genuine lightness in your chest. Libra, some acts of letting go don't take anything away. They simply remove the layers of pressure you've grown used to carrying. You don't lose your value. You don't lose your capacity to care. You give yourself back the right to live without holding the balance of the entire world on your shoulders. And when that happens, energy begins to shift naturally. You may notice you sleep more deeply. You breathe more easily. You no longer feel the need to constantly explain your choices. You no longer feel compelled to prove that you tried hard enough. In that quiet, you begin to hear your own voice again, unmixed with other people's expectations, unshaped by the fear of disappointing anyone. There is something very beautiful about this moment. It's the realization that you are not empty after letting go. You are fuller, full of space, full of presence, full of the feeling of coming home, as if a part of you that you once left behind in the past is slowly returning, bringing back a sincerity you forgot while trying so hard to please the world. You haven't lost anything essential. You've simply stopped holding what no longer belongs to you. And that quiet choice is one of the bravest decisions there is, because not everyone can let go without applause. Not everyone can leave without a reason dramatic enough for others to understand. You do it because you understand, and that understanding is enough. As the energy clears, you begin to stand more firmly on your own ground, not through rigidity, but through ease. You don't need to fight the past. You don't need to deny what once existed. You gently place it down with gratitude and move forward with open hands, ready to receive what truly fits. In this stillness, a feeling you haven't felt in a long time begins to return. The feeling of being yourself without adjustment, of existing without measuring every word, every emotion, of standing in your own life with a quiet self-respect, unshowy, yet deeply steady. And when you finally give yourself back to yourself, the world around you begins to respond differently. Not in a rush, not with noise, but clearly enough for you to know that this letting go has not created a meaningless void. It is opening a new order, one where what comes next will not ask you to sacrifice yourself for peace, but will meet you with fairness, honesty, and a stability that can actually last. And even before you find the words for this new order, it has already begun moving quietly around you. Not loudly, not by force, not through big promises. Just small shifts, like the final gear slipping into place after a long time out of alignment. You start to notice you're no longer spending your energy on things that no longer nourish you. You're no longer trying to prove your worth through endurance. And in that moment, a very clear awareness appears. You begin to see where you once allowed yourself to be undervalued. Not always because others failed to see you, but because you learned to lower yourself to keep the peace. You chose safety over worthiness. You chose a false sense of stability over true alignment, and you don't blame yourself for that. You understand now that this was how you survived, how you loved, how you tried to do the right thing in an earlier chapter of your life. But now, as you stop holding the balance for the entire world, you begin to stand taller inside your own value. You don't speak louder. You don't demand more aggressively. You simply stop accepting what makes you shrink. And strangely enough, the world begins to respond differently. Money, opportunity, stability don't arrive as sudden miracles. They arrive as natural consequences of you finally standing in the right place. When you stop working purely out of obligation, you begin to be compensated more fairly. When you step away from relationships that require constant self-sacrifice, you begin to meet people who recognize your value without needing an explanation. Libra, there is a deep connection between self-worth and material flow. When you stop seeing yourself as the one who must always give way to keep things calm, you stop sending the signal that your effort is negotiable. You don't need to become someone else to earn more. You only need to stop leaving yourself behind. You may notice that new opportunities come to you more gently now, without the sense that you must trade too much for security. without the fear that if you speak your needs, everything will collapse. You begin to trust that real stability doesn't come from pleasing everyone, but from living in alignment with your own values. And inside that trust, a very quiet confidence begins to form. Not the kind that needs to be seen, but the calm assurance of knowing you are worthy. Worthy of fair compensation. Worthy of being chosen. Worthy of entering spaces where you don't need permission to be yourself. You no longer measure your value only through money, but you no longer dismiss it either. You understand that abundance is part of a balanced life, that when you live truthfully, material flow finds you naturally, without force, without debt, without costing you your inner well-being. And as you settle into this new balance, you feel a different kind of stability. Not the kind that comes from everything staying the same, but the kind that comes from no longer being afraid of change. You know you can leave if you need to. You know you can choose again. And that freedom, more than anything else, becomes the strongest foundation your life has ever had. In this ease, you no longer seek validation through sacrifice. You give when you want to. You receive when it's deserved. And for the first time in a long while, you feel yourself living inside an order where inner value and outer value are no longer in conflict, but moving gently side by side, carrying you forward with a quiet, honest sense of wholeness. And then a very quiet moment appears, unannounced, undramatic, but deep enough to make you stop. It feels like standing in a room that has just been cleared out after years of holding old things. Not sad enough to cry, but not light enough to simply turn away. You just stand there. You breathe. And you know that something has truly come to an end. This ending doesn't require big tears. You've already cried enough in silence for a very long time. What remains now isn't pain. It's truth. A bare, peaceful truth. That you've completed a chapter, that the role you once carried has fulfilled its purpose, that an old promise, no matter how sacred it once was, no longer needs to be kept through quiet self-sacrifice. Libra, some farewells aren't meant for anyone else. They're meant for you. You're not standing in front of another person. You're standing in front of your own past, with enough respect not to deny it, and enough courage not to cling to it. You place down the things that once defined you in another season of your life, not because they were wrong, but because you have grown beyond them. There are no loud prayers in this ritual. It happens in a deeply personal silence, a space where you allow yourself to fully feel the ending without needing to justify it. You don't rush to turn it into a lesson. You don't force meaning onto it right away. You simply allow it to be an ending. And that is what makes it sacred. After this farewell, a space begins to open. At first, it may feel unsteady. There's no old structure to lean on, no familiar role to step back into. But then you realize this space is not empty. It's clean. It's calm. It's like a piece of land recently cleared, not yet planted, but ready for new life. You don't rush to fill it. You don't run to replace what's gone. You stay with the openness long enough to feel the freedom it carries. Freedom not because you suddenly have all the answers, but because you are no longer bound by the old ones. In this quiet, you begin to feel the rhythm of your life differently. Less rushed, less pressured to become someone immediately. You allow yourself to move slowly, to look deeper, to notice the smallest movements inside, as if your soul is rearranging itself, letting go of what is no longer needed, keeping only what truly belongs to you. There is something deeply human in this moment. It's the acceptance that endings are not failures. They are an essential part of living. We are taught to keep moving forward, but rarely taught how to end things with grace. And quietly, you are doing that for yourself. You don't deny what has passed. You don't carry it forward as a burden. You place it down with gratitude, and you move on with empty hands. Not because you need nothing, but because you want to receive what comes next without being tangled in old attachments. And in this sacred space, when there is nothing left to hold, nothing left to prove, a very subtle feeling begins to rise. Readiness, not loud, not rushed. Just a knowing that when what truly fits knocks on your door, you will recognize it immediately. Because this time, you are standing in the right place, with a heart that has been cleared, and a life that is ready for a more grounded, lasting kind of presence. And it's exactly when you stop trying to fill that space that something very natural begins to happen. Not through a loud calling, not through dramatic signs, but through a familiar feeling you haven't recognized in a long time. The feeling of being in your own rhythm again. As if after walking for so long, adjusting your steps to match someone else's pace, you're finally allowed to slow down and hear your own footsteps touching the ground. The honesty you've just learned is not loud. It doesn't make you hard or distant. If anything, it softens you. But it's a softness with boundaries. You no longer open your heart because you're afraid of losing. You open it because you want to share. You no longer connect because you need to be filled. You connect because you're already full enough to meet someone. And from that place, a new kind of connection begins to form. Libra, this connection doesn't arrive to save you. It arrives to walk beside you. It doesn't ask you to become a better version to be worthy of it. You're already standing where you belong. Whether it shows up as love, as a partnership, or as a deep commitment to your own life, it carries a very different energy. Unrushed, uncontrolling, with nothing to prove. You can feel it in the unexpected sense of ease when you're close. No guessing if you're doing enough. No fear that being yourself will make everything disappear. This bond isn't built on the fear of loss, but on recognition. The recognition that two souls, two people, two paths can stand side by side without making each other smaller. And if it's love, it doesn't come to take away your freedom. It comes to expand the space within you. If it's collaboration, it doesn't place you in a position where you must constantly prove your value. It sees you from the start. And if it's a commitment to yourself, then it may be the most important relationship of all. A promise that you will no longer turn away from what you feel. A promise that the harmony you bring into the world will begin with self-respect. The most beautiful part is that you no longer enter these connections with the familiar caution. You don't carry old wounds seeking compensation. You don't bring expectations that someone else must complete you. You arrive with a heart that's been cleared, clear enough to recognize what fits, soft enough to receive it without losing yourself. There is a deep inner agreement taking place, not a rushed decision, but a quiet nod from the soul, as if every part of you has finally come into alignment, knowing this is a place where you can rest your feet without tension, a place where you can give without fear of depletion. And inside that agreement, a new belief begins to take root, that what comes from honesty will never require self-sacrifice, that stability doesn't come from holding on tightly, but from the ability to stay and still be free, that you don't need to return to who you once were to be loved. The person you are now is already mature enough to give and receive in a healthy way. As you move forward from here, there's no longer a sense of urgency. You trust that real connections will find you when you're moving at your true pace, and that calm assurance creates a different kind of light around you. The light of someone who has moved through an ending, accepted the open space, chosen honesty, and is now opening their heart to connections that don't wound but lift them. Strong enough to walk far together. Calm enough to know that everything, arriving now, is unfolding exactly as it should. And when you stay still long enough to feel everything that has just passed through you, a very gentle truth begins to reveal itself. That quiet goodbye was never a loss. It didn't take anything precious from you. It simply loosened your grip on what you had been holding for too long. On what was once right, but no longer aligned with the path you're walking now. Libra, the universe doesn't speak in commands. It speaks through arrangement. When a door closes without noise, it's because you've grown enough that you no longer need to be pushed out. You walked away on your own, and that self-direction is the clearest sign that you're ready for a different kind of life. A life that doesn't ask you to hold everything together for everyone else. A life that allows balance to find you naturally. There is a feeling that returns now, familiar, yet carrying a new color. The feeling of trust. Not trust in something outside of you, but trust in yourself. Trust that your intuition does not betray you. Trust that what has ended because it fulfilled its purpose. Trust that you didn't arrive late to your own life. You arrived exactly on time. There's no need to rush forward. And no need to look back to check if you forgot something behind. Everything you needed has already traveled with you this far. What remains is not a burden, but an invitation. An invitation to live more honestly with what you feel. An invitation to make choices not from fear, but from self-respect. There may be moments when you hesitate, moments when you miss the familiar feeling of staying, of sacrificing yourself to keep things calm. But now you know that real peace doesn't come from keeping everything intact. It comes from allowing yourself to change without guilt, from understanding that maturity isn't about enduring more, but about choosing more wisely. The message for you right now is simple, yet deep. Don't hold on to what has already ended, not because it didn't matter, but because it completed what it came into your life to do. You can honor the past without living in it. You can feel gratitude without carrying it into the future. When you allow yourself to move forward, you are not abandoning anyone. You are simply refusing to abandon yourself again. And in that very quiet choice, you are sending a powerful signal into the world. That the balance you seek begins with honesty. That the love, stability, and abundance you desire will not be built on inner exhaustion. That you deserve a life that reflects who you are becoming. Fate is not a distant destination waiting at the end of the road. It is unfolding in every decision you make when you choose to listen to yourself, in every step you take without questioning your worth, in every yes to what nourishes you, and every no to what makes you smaller. As you walk forward from here, you may not see the entire picture ahead, but you don't need to. You only need to know that this path feels lighter, more honest, more aligned with the rhythm inside you. The universe doesn't ask you to be perfect. It only invites you to be present. Present with the sincerity you've just reclaimed. Present with the quiet courage of someone who's finally ready to live truthfully. Let things unfold, without force, without fear, without turning back. Because now that you've come this far, what waits ahead is no longer a test to prove your worth, but a life opening itself to you. Balanced enough to let you breathe deeply, true enough to let you stay, and worthy enough to finally call it home.